Are we quite done?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I, your most handsome host and indubitably inefficient sidekick, are Adventuresome reviews. You can supply something.
Well, we just
Stop
decided that I was, what was the word you used? Inefficient?
Yes.
So I'm being inefficient.
You are a gaping fish that needs to be fried.
With lemon and butter, I should hope.
No, just fried and thrown out. I may feed you to a dog I don't like.
Well, a dog's better than a human. They are the superior race.
I cannot argue that. However, you're still getting eaten by a dog.
There's no greater.
It'll be a really fat dog too, like one of the really rich, posh dog that.
There's no more honorable death.
I'm going to feed you to a purse puppy.
That's a bit demeaning. Let's go back to the fat dog.
It'll be a really fat purse puppy.
It's still a purse puppy. Can it be at least a puppy that's in a purse, or like?
No,
it's gonna grow up like a Labrador or something.
No, it is a purse puppy. We're talking Chihuahua.
I'm gonna have to argue with this in court if I have to.
That is besides the point. You'll be dead and eaten by then. You know what might be a good idea?
What?
Tell them the book we will eventually be reviewing in this disaster of a skit.
I'd rather be inefficient. We are Adventuresome Reviews, by the way.
Yo. Today, reviewing Burn Red Sky.
Which is a fantastic book title.
By Kirsten Espinosa Rosero. I may have gotten the last two names. They may be the other way around. I didn't look and do much research before this.
You might want to pull out the retainer.
I refuse.
Okay, we're just going to call you drunk then.
Yes, I'm very drunk.
Burn Red Skies has a great title and actually a fairly decent cover.
I did like the art style for the cover, and it popped, but it was a little bit too minimalistic. And it also kind of gives away the entire point of the book.
Which I don't know. Because obviously there are...
I guess the book gives the entire point of the book away itself pretty early on. But that's for the intellectual reader, so 95% of the population.
Okay, anyway, on to the synopsis, which we will endeavor to butcher horribly. It's
Yes.
about Dove, the main protector, who, like all good main protagonists,
Is mute.
And has a terribly tragic backstory. Betrayed, abandoned, orphaned, stabbed half a dozen times, killed at least twice, you know, the usual menagerie.
Pretty much everything she said was a lie, apart from the tragic backstory and the betrayal.
I was, making it flowery and exciting.
This is actually a book you don't have to do it very flowery and exciting. We have skyships. We have floating islands. We have cosmic dragons bored of fire.
And a mute protagonist who does very little throughout the book.
Oh, okay, since we're going on to criticisms, yes.
Oh, no, I highly advocate doing nothing.
This book started out really strong for me. Dove's
Yes.
initial situation being the captive and sort of tortured plaything of the violent king put her in a really tense situation that really helps to emphasize the malice of the king and gave her something actively to try and work for, among other variety of stuff. And also served as a good canvas to introduce Valera and the concept of the summoner.
Right. And so just because that may not have been explained at all, Dove is, of course, the main character, and she is currently working as a scribe to the evil king, the Lord of the Fire Nation, and he's psycho, but at the same time he has the ability to become incredibly charming, dangerously charming, and put on this veneer of kindness, and the king actually comes across really well despite not being in the book overly much. And so this is where Dove is, and she is in close relations to the king because she's his scribe, but he's psycho and he abuses her and all that, and which makes for an excellent, like we said, opening chapter.
But not even opening chapter, opening segment. But
Dove is there is a secondary minor villain in this extremely powerful magic wielder by the name of Valera, who has the awesome ability of being able to call a dead dragon back from the grave and incinerate entire armies easily, right? So she's a fairly hoss character, on top of which her personality and demeanor all build up to make her a fantastic villain.
I know, the thing is that
Okay, she's kind of like an anti-hero, anti-villain.
the antagonist, and we'll get into more into her later, but she was probably my favorite part about the book. Her
Yes.
situation, how she simultaneously was serving the king while disliking him and restrained by him. And there's more to explore. Well, no, not really more to explore, but regardless, I just really enjoyed her situation and the way Valera interacted with the world around herself.
Valera's really kind of fun because she hates socializing, and she's an incredibly curmudgeonly character, right? There's one character in the book that she tolerates at all. Everyone else is she's constantly growling at, I'm always about to get rid of in one way or another. And everyone taxes her, right? And it's everyone around her asks her dumb questions that she gets constantly irritated by. And it's really engaging because she's surrounded by fools and idiots to her mind, and because she is such a hyper competent character, like down to her most basest part of her character, she is competent and powerful. And so this lends itself to the fact that you can buy how she considers everyone around her to be useless sycophants.
Yeah. And the major problem for me with the book arrives after Dove is rescued. And then she just stops being a character with any form of agency. She's just there witnessing, and beyond being that, not a huge amount happens around her. Because it's your fairly standard rebellion book. You have your evil king and you have your rebellion, and it's an elemental magic system. And the magic system, I did enjoy. It's well handled in the way it affects personalities and has passive abilities as well as active
and detriments as well. Because like Dove comes from the Fire Nation, so she's immune to fire because she is fireborn, and her blood is very pure. So there hasn't been too many marrying into the Water Nation or the Air Nation.
Yes, and this makes her both immune to fire, like he said, but also susceptible to cold. She cannot stand the cold.
Conversely, just to continue with the magic system a little, it's like you have the Ice Nation, right? And the Ice Nation, like the purer the blood, the harder they deal with sunlight, to the extent that her brother, which comes up in the synopsis,
not her brother, he's a friend or something.
Adopted brother.
Yeah.
Right? Literally cannot go out into daylight without burning up like a vampire.
Yes.
All right, back to you.
And it's just, not only does all Dub do just kind of follow your main rebels as they go about doing stuff, but the main rebels don't even do a whole lot except for go to places and like talk and prepare for the rebellion. And it takes a really tense book and it cuts it off at the knees, and you're just left kind of bored often.
It's unfortunate because Dove takes up the lion's share of chapters, and she doesn't make any decisions, right? She has no plan. It's like she has this distant. It's not even a goal. It's a dream of one day reuniting with her lost brother, who were separated in one of Valera's massacres, right? She summoned the sky, she summoned the dragon, burned an entire village to the ground, and Dove survived because she's immune to fire, but everyone else is dead, right? And thus she and her brother were separated. So Dove has this distant dream of one day reuniting with this brother that she hopes is still alive somehow, but she makes no strides toward this at all.
Yeah, and it's just,
and it's even worse because seeing as she cannot speak, she's mute. She can't even necessarily exert herself upon the flow of events via talking or engage
with the other characters around her in like really meaningful ways.
The author And I would really have liked to have seen the mutinous, which is her primary character trait to some extent, actually become a character in the story per se. It's like have
Her struggle to communicate,
or put her in a danger where in a scene where she needs to communicate but can't, or like
it was an underutilized character trait
right
that had a lot of potential. And
because she's even in the Fire Nation she is considered subhuman because she is defective, right? Which builds a little into her Saw backstory, but not once throughout the entire book does this come in. Do we even get a flashback of her getting dirt slung at her, stones? Nothing. There's no trauma or even scenes given to us where she is shown to be the butt of jokes or any real obstacle.
yeah. In contrast, because we also get various numbers of scenes from Valera and her adoptive brother, and you said that Valera incinerated
Dove's adoptive brother, not Valera's.
Yes, Dove's adoptive brother. And you said that you mentioned that Valera burned down villages and has done multiple times. And an important thing to realize is that Valera in herself is not a malignant character. She is a slave to, of her own volition per se, a slave to honor and loyalty. And that obviously has its entirely own issues. And it makes me feel like there's more there because of how strong-willed Valera is for her to be so subservient to quote-unquote honor and loyalty.
And she's sworn loyalty to the evil king.
Yes, and so Valera is both like morally and situationally in a very complicated spot, which is by also being an incredibly powerful character.
She's the most powerful character in the world, hands down.
Simultaneously the most powerful character in the world, but also kind of the most empathetic in a way because she's put in this situation where she has to do horrible things and obviously does not like doing them and serving the king who she detests, and there's other varieties of stuff, and she still has to do it while railing against it in her own way. And so she was the character I liked in her chapters. I liked the most. I had the most, not liked, but had the most interest in pursuing.
Yes.
Dove's adopted brother is likewise put into a situation where he is allowed agency and control to some small extent. It is a small extent, and it's mostly him being trained and learning to use.
He comes under Valera's wing again, because the king gives. And remember, Dove's brother cannot go into sunlight, and so the king gives Valera this defective receptionist, let's call him. Scribe, receptionist, to Valera.
As a way to taunt and mess with Valera.
Right, and so she takes this guy who she views to be a complete incompetent and slowly starts beating Dove's brother into some small degree of respectability.
But the actual meat of Dove's adoptive brother's story is his moral and character evolution from being someone who's very quiet and soft into someone who's being progressively more violent and abusive or amoral. And it's actually, without making a huge deal of it, it's a well-handled character arc. Because like the actual character work is quite solid for all the characters,
yes.
Side ones, and there's a fair...
Like for everyone except Dove, actually.
Like even Dove's character isn't necessarily poor, it's just she does nothing.
I don't really have I don't remember any kind of character moments for Dove, though. Like Dove makes no decisions throughout the entirety of the book. None. Her main decision was Valera saying, "Here, I'll give you a chance to run away," and she runs away, and this is the decision that she makes. While running away, she decides to stow away on a flying skyship. That is the only decision she makes throughout the entire book. Elsewise, she's just trailing behind more driven characters.
Yeah. To pivot to a more popular point, it's something we touched on, but I really like the world building.
Yes.
From the way the magic interacts with the populations and the narrative, to also sky ships and floating islands and the cosmic undead spirit fire dragons.
Yeah.
It was just, there's a lot of cool ideas
And they're well handled without ever delving into vast swaths of exposition.
Yes, and it was just really fun and enjoyable to explore the world and see bits and bobs of it. And now, now to pivot back to more criticisms, the book had a lot of different characters, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there's very particularly one scene where you're following you have your main character set out,
Yep.
and then in the midway of the book it pivots to a completely new pair of characters that have no connection to any of the events that you've been set up for.
Yep.
And it goes beyond that. You have multiple POV characters that don't do a whole lot, as in like value to the reader to have POV characters. Like you have several POV chapters given to a primary rebel who meets Dove within a few chapters and yet still gets chapters after that, but for no reason. It's just, there's not secret meetings, he doesn't have his own personal conflicts, it's just not a whole lot is done despite having multiple characters.
They're like chapters dedicated to the character rather than the character progressing the story.
Yeah.
Which has their place, but a lot of times those chapters can be merged together effectively.
Yeah, and it's a small criticism, but again, it added to the second half or even the later parts of the book feeling a little bit rudderless.
Yeah, and it's largely, like, the book feels rudderless largely because of Dove. Like I said,
but also because it's not even only because of Dove. It's because there is no driving event. Even in Valera's chapters,
but with Valera and Dove's adoptive brother, there was progression there. Dove's adoptive brother was clearly headed in a direction, even though the only progress happening was in his character and him learning to fight and slowly coming into his own. Yeah. Right? Dove didn't. Dove, you didn't even really have a direction with Dove, because after she smuggled onto the sky ship, neither she nor the readers had any idea which direction the ship was going. So we were kind of just waiting for us to get to a location that we knew nothing about. It wasn't even this necessarily hush-hush location where Dove asked and tried to find out where they were going, and they're like, no, it's a secret, right? So it's not even a mysterious location. We just know we're going somewhere and we're going to get there eventually. And there was no scenes, nothing dedicated to this.
Yeah, it's just, a rudderless, lacking of like instigating events for all three of the characters, but at least Valera and the adopted brother, whose name I forget, were put in conflicted situations.
Yes.
And were given movement in and of themselves. I think that's all I have.
I think we've beaten the book a little more than it deserves, and so
like the prose is solid,
yes.
And there's some really cool scenes, like when Valera summons the dragon is pretty awesome.
Valera is a really decent character, but there's another set of characters that I really enjoyed, and for me, it's. I was really excited when whenever their chapter showed up, and it's one of the later characters introduced. I can't remember his or her name, but it starts out with a man in a cage trundling off to enslavement and torment, and he's all wrapped up in chains, but he is completely on top of the situation, right? And he's clearly an old warrior, 30, 40, what have you.
I think the word for that is veteran.
Okay, so he's clearly a veteran. But even though he's surrounded by enemies in one of the worst possible situations, he is very, very calm, very collected about this, and he starts planning the demise of the people around him, which is where we introduce his girlfriend. And they have not met, right? So it's the girlfriend in the book, and she breaks out of her chains and runs around killing everybody. And he just sits back and watches her, ready to step in if needed. And he doesn't need to step in, so his eyebrows kind of go up. And thus starts this absolutely fantastic relationship for me. Because he goes completely Moon Knight over this girl, right? But it's almost like it's almost love at first sight, but handled in a fantastic way because it's not not puppy dog love where he immediately starts chasing after her. No, it's all happening inside his head as he engages with her in a very normal, balanced way. And he, at the same time, even as he's falling desperately, madly in love with this girl, he's keeping her at arm's distance. I forget exactly why or how to frame it, but at the same time, they fit perfectly together because they both have this psychotic streak, right? And it's just really enjoyable to experience.
Yeah. Both those characters had a fair amount of charisma, so it's just...
And they're just fun to watch go to work. Okay, so it's like they invade an entire enemy camp, but because she's in the middle of one of her moral crises, she says, I'm done with killing. So they invade the entire camp, and they take a bet of whoever kills the first guy loses, 30 gold or gets all the loot, what have you. So they invade an entire enemy camp, and they have to do it without killing anyone. And that's just like a great scene because they are both stone cold killers, and he has no problem with killing, but because she's in a moral quandary, one of her midlife crises, he goes along with this and forms this bet, and it's just like, it's that sort of psychotic craziness where they both just lean into it fantastically. Yeah. And he eventually loses because he kills someone by accident. Right, but that just goes to show the competence of the characters. It's like, they take out an enemy camp without killing anyone on purpose, and they successfully do so. And so their narrative was, once again, really enjoyable.
Anything else?
Yeah. One or two minor criticisms that we'll leave unsaid because they're minor.
Yeah.
All in all, though, not terrible. Just a bit slow.
Yeah. Au revoir! Goodbye! I'm dying a horrible death.
Fare thee well, our future friends.
It's tuberculosis with worms.
That sounds exciting.
I know, I was quite pleased with it. Bye.